If you're like me, you're somebody who has a ton of different actions in Photoshop. You might have a lot of panels, you might have a lot of scripts. Heck, you might have just things everywhere. Well, Retouching Toolkit is something that I think you're gonna find really interesting, and I'm so excited, as you could probably see, that I'm gonna talk about it and have the pleasure to show you exactly what it does and take a look at exactly how to use it. So if you're completely unfamiliar with Retouching Toolkit, imagine if you have a lot of actions that you normally use. Well, in the actions panel, actions are everywhere, right? Sometimes you don't need everything to access one thing. Imagine if you have different scripts that you use or different tools that you use in Photoshop. Well, what if you wanted to combine the best of everything that you use for your efficiency into one sleek panel that you can customize, whether it's color, layout, size, shape? You could even add toolbar items in Photoshop. So maybe you want to add, for example, your dodge and burn actions. Maybe you want to actually add some toolbar elements like your brush tool or the sharpening tool or whatever it is. And maybe even some scripts like Connie Wallstrom's Retouching Toolkit 2.0 has a couple of really great scripts that I use. So I can combine everything into one little panel, whether it's for portrait retouching, whether it's for compositing. I can make individual panels for each of them and make it really efficient. I know it sounds insane and incredible at the same time, but I get the pleasure of actually showing you how to use it, how to customize it, and just taking a look at the program and showing you how to get around the entire user interface. So let's just jump in, show you, and you get a better idea of how it works. Now that we have Retouching Toolkit 3.0 open on our computer, the first thing I want to mention is that this is not a tutorial on how to install the program. What you need to do is click on the top right where it says Help. Go to that page, and I'm going to link that in the description as well. But make sure you check it out because there's some videos that Stefan made about how to get installed correctly and make sure everything's operating the way it should and it's communicating with Photoshop the way it should be. Okay, first and foremost. But what this video is about is specifically on how to use the configurator in being creative and making sense of all the buttons so that you don't really miss out on any setting that you need to know, or how to add a button or an action or things like that, okay? And it's gonna make sense of everything in a logical fashion for you, so you're not fumbling around trying to figure out this, because I personally did that grunt work for you, and I just wanna show you the best of everything. Okay. The first thing here is you're gonna see this Legacy 2.0 toolkit, and that's basically gonna be Connie's original Retouching Toolkit, which by itself, to be honest with you, has a ton of great scripts and tools and actions that I think everyone should know about. And there's some things that I use on a regular basis, like the Gradient Map Maker, Smart Liquify, and Updating Smart Objects. Has a bunch of different actions here for frequency separation, etc. So if you're looking to learn more about how to use these functions, I'm going to put that link in the description as well, so you can check it out and learn these advanced scripts that are really, really helpful. But obviously, not only do you get that with the purchase of the toolkit, Connie is actually working on an update to this, so you have a new base module that's updated as part of the purchase, and that's going to be really incredible. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the purpose of the Retouching Toolkit is it's a modular interface. So say you have a bunch of different buttons that you use or actions, and you want to modify them and put them in a way that's more logical to you. So say, for example, you have a panel that you already use a lot, has a ton of actions and features that you tend to use often, but maybe you don't use everything. And that's something that I think I have a problem with. I like using Connie's Retouching Toolkit, but there's some things I don't use, and I want to combine them with my own actions. How can I do that? Or maybe I want to add additional tools that I use, like the healing brush. Or maybe I want to put menu options in there, like file save as or exporting options in one nice, efficient panel. And I think that's what this thing is entirely about, is bringing the customization to you so that you're able to actually get the most out of your own workflow by having something that's really efficient. So let me go ahead and show you how to use this and get around this whole user interface to create something that's specifically for you. I think the best way to show you exactly how to work the configurator is just by making a new panel. That way you can see all the tools and functions as I'm working, and you can get an idea of how to work it logistically and logically, I should say. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to go up here to the top and click on New, and what that's going to do, it's going to give us a new panel to work with, a blank canvas. On the left-hand side, we have button, button group, button stack, etc., etc., etc. And this is exactly what we're going to use to actually build out the panel. First thing first, if I go ahead and drag number 1 to the right-hand side, it's going to create more space for us, and I can do that. I can also hide panel number 1 by clicking on the eye. Next, over here on the left-hand side, we're going to actually start by dragging button and putting it and stacking them to show you how to work it. I can also click on one of them, change the color, or also change the name, blue button. Later on, I'm going to show you how to assign actual actions and commands to the buttons themselves. But first and foremost, if you notice that over here, if I want to stack them next to each other, I can't. I can obviously replace the order and organization, but I can't stack them horizontally. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on button group, drag it to the actual panel. It's going to create this space for us here. And then now if I actually put different buttons in, it's going to create horizontal rows for us. And that's how you do that. The purpose of this is also because maybe I want a horizontal layout. So let's take this off here and maybe add this one here and add this one here. And you can see now I've created this horizontal thin strip. And the purpose of this is really great because maybe I want an actual horizontal toolbar, which Photoshop really doesn't give you. And this one can, which is, I think, incredible. And I think it's really great. Another thing that we could do here, speaking of buttons and button groups, is there's something else over here called button stack. Let me show you what that is. So if I actually click on button stack and drag it over, you'll notice it creates a little gap here. And now I can put buttons here, and put buttons here, put buttons on buttons, and I can get a whole button crew going here. And you can see I've actually created different dividing spaces, so everything's not just, equally sectioned off. And this obviously is incredible. I'm going to show you different commands and functions we're going to assign to each button, but this is how to actually navigate through the Components tab. Another feature which is really great is toolbar versus toolbar flow. So toolbar itself, if I click on it and drag it over here to our panel, it creates another blank space. So if you have used toolbars in Photoshop, obviously what you're going to find here is that on the icon tab under Photoshop, you can select any Photoshop tool or adjustment layer that you want. And this is great for people who might not want a vertical setup as well, or might want to add specific tools to their panel. And I can select maybe, let's say, the spot healing brush here. I can select the eyedropper tool. Let's just select a bunch of random ones. And you'll notice now that it has a bunch of different tools that I could use on my panel. And the other really great part is maybe you don't really like a vertical toolbar that Photoshop naturally has, like so. And if I want a horizontal one, I could do that, and I can save this without the buttons if I want to, get rid of these guys here. See you later. And now I have a specific toolbar catered to my buttons. And I can even rename this tab to toolbar if I want to. And suddenly I have a Photoshop toolbar that's horizontal. And that, my friends, is really cool. And I can combine actions to this and other tools and adjustment layers, and this just makes my day every single time I talk about it. Okay, so that's really cool. So let's say you have the toolbar here, and the next thing is toolbar flow. So toolbar flow is very similar to the vertical panel in Photoshop, as I mentioned. And so if I actually take toolbar flow and drag it under the toolbar here with icons, you'll see another blank area. Now you won't see an actual little tab here like we mentioned over here. But now if I go back to icons and I drag some more tools here, you'll see the tools stack up to the left. And the purpose of this is if I don't have these guys over here, let me just go and drag them off, or I can just hit remove selected, either one. You'll notice that now it's only over here to the left. And the purpose of this is I could obviously stack them however I want to. And if I want to go vertically, I can add another toolbar flow, drag the icons here, and create either a vertical line, horizontal line, a little cube here as I've done. You can make them go horizontally, vertically, whatever I want. And this is really great because I purposely really sometimes want to create customized little toolbars which have their independent icons. And if I want to go horizontally, I can. and they'll stay nice and congruent. See, now it even goes vertically to one little column here, or it goes back to the three horizontal or two horizontal lines I've done. The next thing I want to talk about is titles and tabs. I've actually removed all the icons from before just to show you exactly how this works. So as I mentioned, and you probably know by now, I can add buttons, but let's say I want to categorize things a little bit easier. If I create a button group here and drag it over at the bottom and then create buttons, and let's say that, for example, that these buttons represent something different than these buttons here. So maybe this button is something like dodge and burn, but this button is something like export. And then this button here is something like save. So we have workflow options, and then we have export options here. So I can put a title bar in between the two, and I can title this export options. And I can have another title over here that says retouching. I should say, let me click on the title here and call it retouching. There we go. And then every button that I add is specifically to different retouching options. What I like to personally do is just change the colors to match the different schemes. I think that's an easier divide for me visually, but we all have our different preferences and so forth. So that's how you use titles. Tabs are something else really, really cool. So tabs themselves are ways to put panels in panels. It's like Inception. So if you mentioned, if we mentioned earlier about the first panel that we had, let me drag this over to the right-hand side and open up Connie's original panel. You'll notice that there's multiple tabs here. One of them is for retouching, and the other one's for masking. So you can have multiple tabs for different options and different tools. Maybe you want a tab specifically for, I don't know, Photoshop icons. Or this could be something like composite workflow. And so you can have a couple of different actions here specifically to compositing. Like for example, like this one could be dodge and burn. This one could also be, let's see, select color range, because you could use menu options. So for example, you can say, assign this button to select and color range, and then you can go forth and do that. And you can do all kinds of things. So for example, if I also want to add a tab within a tab, what I could do is put a tab here under compositing workflow, and this tab here could be like main tab, and then I could add another tab within it. So I can keep cascading like that. So compositing workflow could have, you know, your processes section, and you can have your export section. So within one single window, you could do a ton of different things. I'm going to add another button here, another button group here, and so forth. So for example, Connie, if you've noticed, let's put this here together like so and remove this. Here we go. So Connie, as you've seen, has a tab here for retouching, and it has a bunch here, a masking tab. He also has a main tab. You can customize your own functions here by default. He has an export tab as well. So there's a ton of things you could do. Next thing I want to mention is, aside from the icons here that we've seen before, so I can come here and add an icon. I'll add a button group here, come over to icon and drag the icons that I want. Or I'm sorry, let me just take that out here for a minute. It's actually not icon, it's actually toolbar, and then icons. You can actually assign different little other icons from Font Awesome, which is great. And you can assign these to whatever you want as well. So let's get into that next. Aside from having these really great icons you can put in here, whether it's from the Photoshop UI, Photoshop icon UI, or from the Font Awesome UI, I can then also now go to the command prompt and then assign different actions to my panel. So let's get started and show you how to do that. For example, some of you already have my Photoshop actions. Now, before we actually begin assigning actions to the panel, you want to make sure that over here on the left-hand side, it says refresh actions. But also under the settings tab, make sure where it says Photoshop path, you have the correct Photoshop version selected. Then I'm going to hit close, then I'm going to hit refresh actions. And what that does, it's going to talk to Photoshop, find out which actions are available in that version of Photoshop, and load them all here so they can talk properly and everything is good and dandy. So let's say I have my Photoshop actions that you've already seen, and I'm just going to keep this for now, and I'm going to say dodge and burn. I'm going to select it. And over here, I've shown you how to name things and change the colors, but also here at the bottom, it says left click. What that means is it's trying to find what to execute. So I can come over here and select dodge and burn. And then now this dodge and burn button is assigned to that action. Another really great part here is I can, let's say, change this to, let's say, retouching setup. And now that's set to retouching setup, I'm going to select that as my action. And so now I have those two there. I can change the color of the button I want to. I can reorganize it if I want to. And this is great because in the future, if I decide that I actually want and like some things from other panels or other scripts, I can add them there. For instance, I personally really like Connie's Retouching Toolkit. And then, for example, now that I have his actions and scripts there, what I could do is I'm going to take one of his scripts or his actions and load them into mine. One of the tools that I really like from Connie is a gradient map maker, and that's a script. So under color correction, I can say gradient map maker, and here it is located here. So instead of saying, let's say, dodge and burn, or in fact, let's just add another button at the bottom. I'm going to select it. I'm going to say gradient map maker, and then I'll select the command prompt and say gradient map maker, and I'm going to click on it. Not drag, I'm going to click on it, and suddenly now this button here is set to the script gradient map maker, and I'll change that to purple. I don't know why, but I'm going to do that. So now I have a couple of actions, a script, and now if I want to add an icon, I'm going to go here and select toolbar and put it at the bottom, and then I'll select maybe some of the most common buttons that I use. So say the brush tool, the clone brush, and let's see, what else do I use here that's really impressive? How about a couple of adjustment layers? Maybe we'll put a curve. Right, so now I have a stack here that's really great. It selects what I want, and now for compositing workflow, I can do that too. Another really, really cool part about this is I can take a tab and drag the entire tab into mine. So maybe I actually like Connie's masking panel, and I actually want to take that. So I'll take it here and drag it here, or drag it here. So now I have a tab taken from the first one and loaded here. Before we actually begin implementing this into Photoshop, let me quickly show you the last few little tips and tricks about this whole thing that I think is really important to know. The first thing here is, let's say you're trying to find an action to actually apply to a button and you're not sure what that action was. You can look at this filter tab here under command and then say whatever action you want, like dodge. If I put dodge, you see all the words that have dodge in it here. You can see dodge, dodge and burn, soft light dodge, and the rest over here, dodge, dodge and burn. So you can cycle through all of the actions that you have and search what you want, which is actually kind of cool to use this program to find your action that you want and see where it is. And to be honest with you, I sometimes use this configurator just to find where my actions are because I have so many of them and I'm trying to clean up. So that really helps. So that's really cool too. So I can see infinite color, and it has my infinite color actions here too, which is great. So that's another cool tip. Another really great tip here is on the top left, you see what is known as lock layout or lock rows. So this is basically for helping you keep, I guess, making you sane when you're modifying some of these layouts. So let's say that I have this area here. I want to actually lock the row. So if I click on lock row and then I drag this over here, you should see the whole layer or the whole row getting dragged top to bottom. However, if I don't select lock row, if I move this, you see the button actually move out. The same thing happens if I click on locked row and I want to bring a button over the row. It comes over it. It doesn't go inside the row itself, which is great. So it just locks it into place. And so that way, if you like something, you don't have to worry about it. The next part is lock layout, which is actually pretty basic. It locks the entire layout for you. So that's that. The next thing here in the top left are all these little buttons here that I want to make sure you completely understand. The first one over here is going to be called save. So let me go ahead and minimize panel 1 and panel 2, and then I'm going to hit save. So what happens, so it says the data is now stored successfully. So in case I actually decide that, you know what, I'm going to remove all this stuff here and I don't want it, and then I realize, wait a second, I do want it, and I can just hit load, and then now it just loads whatever my last save state was. Okay, so that's really obvious. However, let's say you want to actually export the panel. Let's say I want to export panel number 2 and give it to somebody or upload it somewhere or whatever it is. I can say export, I can say panel number 2, I can say export, and say downloads, and send panel to Connie. Obviously, I wouldn't name the direction as my file name, but maybe Connie likes what I did, so I'm going to send it to him. So that'll be my panel name, and it'll be .json by default, and let's save. And so now, if I go ahead and delete this, or if I load it, let's say I import this, and I say send panel to Connie, because Connie's going to love this panel. I'll say panel number 2, do not overwrite, and I'll say import. And now I have panel number 3, which is basically the same thing as panel number 2. And that's really handy. So maybe I want to do this because I, for some reason, want to create another panel which is very similar to panel number 2, except panel number 3 is specifically going to be for like compositing or something. Or I want to do everything except for this tab here. So I'll click on composite workflow. I'll delete that one. I'll click on mask. I can even say remove selected. Either one, to be honest with you, personal preference is multiple ways of doing this. And now I have this one over here, which is my main tab. And I can bring this up here. And now I have a different panel, which was based off of this one. So panel number 3 can be one specifically versus another one, or you get the idea. So that's that. Settings we've already mentioned, and remove selected, pretty obvious too. Before we actually begin to go into Photoshop, let me show you a panel that I made by playing with the toolkit and getting an idea of what's possible. So I'm going to hit import, and I'm going to click on Essential Toolkit, and that's what I called mine. Oops, import, Essential Toolkit, open, and import. And here I have my Essential Toolkit. And this is something that I'm working on. It's a work in progress. I'm still getting the hang of it because I think there's a bunch of other things that I could do with it. I'm going to change the layout, the functionality, the icons, etc. But for example, I have my retouching setup, which is based off of my own actions. If you have my retouching classes, you already know that I have a retouching setup button there. So you can see it runs my action, retouching setup. Over here I have gradient map, which is my gradient map maker. I use that all the time from Connie's workflow. As I mentioned, if you don't know about the Retouching Toolkit 2.0 functionality and options, check out the link in the description. It's all there for you, and Connie's going to update that again with a future module. I have retouching actions like frequent separation. I have my dodge and burn, my dodge, burn, soft light, dodge and burn. I have my helper layers like black and white, grain layers. I have an oversaturation mask. I have a color fix mode, so I use this often as well. I have different workflow options here. I have tiles, so if I want a menu option, which is also great for Toolkit, is aside from just assigning actions, I can assign different file menu options. So I can assign things like window, arrange, and tile all vertically, or just tile. And I use that often if I want to have multiple documents open but all next to each other really quickly. I'll use that, and immediately my workflow is really clean and nice. So, and then again, a bunch of tools here and the adjustment layers I use often. So this should give you an idea of so many different things that you could do with the toolkit. But let me show you how to bring this into Photoshop itself. Before we do that, I'm going to hit save. And then I'm going to go into Photoshop itself. And then now that I'm in Photoshop, I'm going to go to Window, Extensions, and Retouching Toolkit number 2. And the reason I said Retouching Toolkit number 2 was because I also have Retouching Toolkit number 1. And that one is going to be the first one we worked on over here. If I, for some reason, decide that I actually want to add something and update this, like over here, I'm going to hit Save again, then go to Photoshop, and then I'm going to click on the menu option and say Load Layout. and suddenly it loads and updates the panel. And this is really cool because say this panel doesn't fit in the confines of whatever you're doing, then you can adjust it and load it accordingly. Same thing goes for if you want to change the actual horizontal layout or vertical layout. I can do that. I can drag this over here. I can bring this over here. I can bring this up. Maybe I don't want the tools and I can have something horizontal as well. Another really great workflow option, as I mentioned before, is if you want to actually create a horizontal toolbar up here, I can simply go back to my configurator, create a new layout, I'll put a new button group here, put buttons along the way. So say I have a few options I want to do here. I could do that. I can then also come back here to my toolbar, put toolbar here. I'll come back to my icons, drag a few icons here. Not that I would use these icons, but just for demonstration purposes. I can quickly hit save, come back to my retouching workflow, go to extensions, toolkit number 3, and I'll just hit load layout. And again, after I do that, I can bring this over here, and now I have a horizontal toolbar in case that's your preference as well. Now that I've gone over everything regarding the configurator, I really hope you use a Retouching Toolkit to your advantage. I'm so excited to see what comes of it, especially because Connie in the future will also be developing new modules, as well as a community as a whole, by sharing a lot of what they've created in helping a lot of people expedite their own workflows. As a bonus, Retouching Toolkit's also going to be available for $129 up to 1 week after launch, which is basically the pre-launch pricing, and then full price of $179 after that, which could change depending on if there's a sale going on or something like that. But however, you should take advantage now because included you do get the legacy panel, as well as in the future whatever Connie does update on the new module, and the functionality to basically do what you want. I'm excited to see what you create. If you create something really cool, please do share it with us. I'll put the link to the group, which you can access and join and share and learn a lot more. And be sure to check out the help tab, as I mentioned, to get started and anything you're completely stuck on, and they'll make sure that you are up to speed. And I look forward to seeing what you have to make.